financials and the audit outcomes. But before we start, as I've indicated to you colleagues, I'm in receipt of the apology of the minister who is abroad. The deputy minister is due in a cabinet committee meeting on matters of the post office, amongst others. We spoke this morning, having received his letter, and indicated that he could join the meeting, but would have to be excused at about 11:30. And so he is in the meeting as we speak now, following that commitment, which I communicated to you colleagues. And then I'm advised further that the CEO has a bereavement and therefore unable to join us this morning, and I have conveyed the condolences of the committee to the CEO through the chairperson of the board as well, and I further reiterate them again this morning if they can be conveyed to the CEO. So, colleagues, that is where we are with this meeting this morning. So I think if we can just start there, so that we can make a determination on how to proceed. I have noted the comments that have been made in our discussion. So I'd just like that we make a determination as to whether, because I'm not, I think the chairperson of the board is here this morning and board members. Yes, the chair is here this morning. So colleagues, I just want to place that matter first, and then we will make a determination. Colleagues, over to you.
Morning, Chair.
Morning, Babu Samia. Happy Wednesday.
Yeah, happy Wednesday indeed. No, Chair. I think as you have shared this through our group, I've placed my view that if the chairperson of the board, having heard the apology of the CEO, we share the same message that you have sent through the chair of the board in expression of our own condolences, and the fact that the minister is out of the country, and therefore we have to continue with the meeting. I'm doing so with a view which seeks to observe the fact that we have received the apology. You have received that apology, and which is a different turn to what we had yesterday, and therefore I want to propose to the meeting that let's proceed with the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Babsam. Are there any other views?
Mr. Chairman, I put my name in the group.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. I'm using the same device because of network. My apologies. Yes, Bablis.
Yeah, I'm also having network problems, and again, it's in the Marks building where we're supposed to have proper Wi-Fi, but nevertheless, I'm now on my hotspot. Mr. Chairman, my concern really is that it's both the minister and the deputy minister, whilst they submit an apology, we're just not going to come, and have prioritized other meetings or a trip abroad over coming to appear before Scopa. And it took you, as I understand from you this morning, and correct me if I'm wrong, to persuade the Deputy Minister to sort of like do us a favor and come for an hour and a half. It really is unacceptable. The CEO's bereavement is I mean, it's what it is. We really can't blame the CEO for that. But the minister and deputy minister appeared to be very happy simply to say to Scopa, well, we've got more important things to do. We're not coming. And the deputy minister then eventually agreed to come for an hour and a half. Mr. Chairman, I think the deputy minister must stay for the duration of this meeting and show the priority that should be given to Parliament and to Scopa. Whatever meeting is happening for the post office can be delayed for a couple of hours. I'm sure it's a virtual meeting, and the deputy minister must show that he takes us seriously. It's completely unacceptable. I am concerned about the absence of the CEO, so I'd like to know who will be able to answer our questions. Is the CFO here? Is the COO? And I'm afraid because of my bad signal, I may have missed that, so please forgive me if I have. I do note that there is a certain Blakey on the list here, and his name appears under Ian Blakey. His name appears in the list of wasteful expenditure. So I'm rather pleased he's here, because when I get to that, I'm hoping he'll be able to explain why there's wasteful expenditure that he is responsible for, and what action has been taken to recover that money. But that we'll get to just now. So, Mr. Chairman, my point is that I think a very robust letter must be written to the leader of government business to explain the dissatisfaction of this committee with ministers who prioritize other issues or meetings ahead of meetings with Scopa. It happened yesterday, it happened again today, and that we actually insist that Deputy Minister stays now for the duration of the meeting, and his staff can rearrange his diary for later in the day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Oblis. All right, Honorable Van Minen.
Thanks very much, Chair. For some reason, I can't seem to access my camera. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm busy using my hand device here. I want to agree with the Honourable Lees. It's a problem, and I know you and I have also discussed it sort of offline. It's a problem that we're seeing with online meetings, that it seems to be relatively easy for ministers and CEOs and CFOs to avoid their responsibility to come and account to Scopa. And I think that one of the solutions certainly would be to return to face-to-face meetings. I realize that is a difficult thing to achieve at this point, but I think it is certainly something as a committee we should really be prioritizing. I also find it very difficult to sort of understand why an organization that is supposed to appear in front of us to give information is suddenly hamstrung because the CEO isn't able to be here. I mean, surely there is somebody who can take care of day-to-day business. And accountability, doesn't get put on hold, it remains. So I think that they have to get their house in order. And I think in general, when it comes to Scopa hearings, we have to make it very clear that they can't just duck out of a Scopa meeting by the last minute claiming that various people aren't available. And certainly with the ministers, it appears to be an ongoing issue, with a lot of ministers just not appearing, not going to questions, and not reporting back to Parliament. It's something we really need to prioritise. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to indicate that I'm advised that the chair of the board is here, the COO is present, the CFO is present, and the chairperson of the Audit and Risk Committee is also present. And to say that the DM, having sent his apology, was the one who phoned me this morning to try and sort of said to find a way in order for us to make this work. So I just want to say that it was the DM who phoned, having sent an apology. I would imagine having realized the jiffy in which we were in. All right, so colleagues, I'm going to suggest that we proceed with this meeting.
Before that, Chair.
Okay, that was some. Okay.
No, before that, Chair, I would really want to take exception for the members to talk with folk tongues when it comes to certain institutions. They would insist differently, and as if our consistency as a committee is thrown to the sea. I would want to urge members to always be consistent in dealing with matters, including this one. In my proposition to say let's continue, I know for a fact that the basis of that proposition is informed by the fact that the minister has forwarded the apology, and we have been advised that the CEO is faced with a situation which he can't change, and therefore the absence in the meeting becomes valid in a sense, and to make it a big issue now when we are dealing with this institution, when we failed yesterday to do the same, and what sort of members are we going to be viewed in this instance? So I don't take it lightly that we choose to be very slight in some institutions and to be very hard on other institutions. It can't work like that. As a committee, we must ensure that we are consistent in our voice all the time. Thank you very much, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I have to now respond. I'm sorry, may I?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is an inappropriate conversation to be having at this meeting, and the circumstances surrounding yesterday and Eskom are completely different from the circumstances surrounding SABC. So to accuse certain members of this committee of inconsistency is completely fallacious, and I would ask that this conversation take place in private, please, Mr. Chairman, but I have to put it on record that I object to that comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much, colleagues. Yes, I think that we do need to have a discussion amongst ourselves around these matters, and fundamentally believe that we need to find each other and iron out these things, because perception is everything. And we dare not fall into the trap of setting precedents which come back to bite us in the execution of our own duties and responsibilities. So yes, I would suggest that we will find time to meet, even if it means we have one of our graveyard sessions just on these internal matters of the committee that may be beneficial. Colleagues, I will suggest that we continue with the meeting, just like we did yesterday. So I think the scope of attendance is on a similar trajectory. The only difference here has been, in my view, better communication on the part of the SABC. So I'll request that we go into the hearing now, and then
Before that, please, Chairperson. Just
Right,
before we
Ma'am
go to the
Dolasi?
hearing.
Okay.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Good morning, Mama.
Morning, colleagues, as well as the department. Just want to concur with what Honorable Somi is saying. It can't be right that people say and do as they wish, and then other people are not allowed to respond because the matter will be discussed in a private meeting. I don't think it's acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable, Chair. I think I agree with Honorable Somio exactly all that you are saying. There's no apology about that because that is a fact. And I also agree with you to say we must have our own meeting, not a private meeting. Whilst other people are free to say and do as they wish publicly, we are all equal to that, Chair. We can do it. However, that you advise that let's go to our meeting, we'll do it for some per se fully.
No, thank you. The reason why I'm insisting that we proceed and we'll have, I'm trying to manage time so that we deal with the matter at hand. All right.
Chairperson.
All right. Can I take this opportunity now?
I forgot my hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Liz.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to go. Let's have the debate now. If that's what Honorable Tulash wants, and let's go for it. I'm up for a good debate. It would be very interesting, and I think it would be counterproductive.
Colleagues, I have made a determination on this matter now that the matter will be discussed and we will have a meeting, and even if it means it's a graveyard session meeting, we will do that. And I've made that determination that we are now proceeding with the meeting, the hearing. So can we please do that? I do not believe at all that this assists, and I will continue to implore on the collective strength of the unity of this committee, because in my view, we are the last line of defense of Parliament's oversight and accountability, and therefore we cannot allow any situation which puts that last line of defense in any kind of jeopardy or towards a trajectory which finds itself cracking the unity which has sustained us. So I am pleading with you, colleagues, that we maintain the healthy spirit of collective execution of duty and support of each other. Of course, there will be differences along the way, but the unity of purpose, in my view, far outweighs areas of disagreement which may arise. And therefore, I'm just calling for us to have our meeting and have this discussion frankly and honestly and openly amongst each other for the greater good. And the greater good here is the public purse, which we watch on behalf of the South African public. Teamwork works. I plead with you, colleagues. Right, on that note, can I take this opportunity now to welcome the Deputy Minister, the Chairperson of the board and board members and the executives of the South African Broadcasting Corporation who are appearing before us this morning. And AG, National Treasury, as always, and SIU, thank you very much for being here. I will now like to hand over to the Deputy Minister if there are any opening remarks or comments you'd like to make. Gaya Babu Somya, and then once the Deputy Minister is done, Mazambani will be first off the bat with your section, and then we'll proceed as we proceed with the hearing. Deputy Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson of the SCOPAC, Honorable Hlengwa. Greetings to all the members of this esteemed Committee of Parliament, the delegation from the SABC, the Chair, and all other colleagues on the platform. Welcome. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you very much, Chair, for clarifying what I don't know whether it was a misunderstanding or it was a deliberate impression that was created that for some reason we were dragged here to this meeting. The reality, Chair, is that there are two meetings which are clashing. There is a cabinet committee. It's not just any other meeting as is been presented here. I'm sure, Chair, you know that every Wednesdays are either cabinet or cabinet committee meetings that are taking place. So there is a cabinet committee that is taking place this morning, in which our department is presenting two bills, the Sapc Amendment Bill as well as the Post Office Amendment Bill. And the minister is not around, as you know, she's overseas. And I'm supposed to lead the delegation of the department to go and attend the cabinet committee to go and present our bill and motivate that cabinet must approve the bill so that we can table it in Parliament. So it is not just the side show of the Post Office, Chair. I took the initiative to get in touch with yourself after I realized that even the acting minister of our department is not going to be around to present the two bills. Just to sensitize you that we have got this predicament. There's a cabinet committee, there is also the SCOPA hearing. And from our discussion, we then came to a conclusion that I should be available to this meeting, although I'm not going to be with you for the rest of the meeting, because at the time when these items are presented in a cabinet committee, I should be there. So I thought I must just clarify that point, Chair. And, you know, we respect this committee. We respect all the other committees of Parliament. We understand their constitutional role. We ourselves have been in this situation where we are leading the committees of Parliament, and we understand how important it is. So I think it's not okay, Chair, to create an impression that we don't respect these committees. Some of us take very serious exception to an impression that gets to be created that we are irresponsible in the manner in which we interact with this important institution of our people. So I thought I must just say that those words, Chairperson. But Chair, the SABC is appearing before yourself to interact with you about their financials, the turnaround plan that they have developed. We are with the Chairperson of the board. I'm going to ask that you allow him to give make some few remarks as a way of introducing the topic, Chair. You know that we are almost in the second year of the turnaround plan that the SABC has developed. We have observed in the past when these reports are presented that we are doing very well as the SABC in terms of achieving the targets of the turnaround plan. And so the rest of the issues, I think, will come out in the engagement that's going to take place. But from where we are as a ministry, we are quite satisfied that the turnaround plan has been implemented we are achieving the targets that we've set for ourselves. We are left with 1 year of the turnaround plan. However, there are still some issues. We've seen some decline in terms of the revenue from advertising, which remains a cause for concern for ourselves. But we think that the organization is dealing with such matters, and we hope that at the end of the turnaround plan, the organization will be stabilized. We will see financial sustainability of the SABC going forward. If you allow, Chair, I would invite the Chairperson of the board, Mr. Makatini, to just give some few words, and then we'll hand over to yourself. Chair, if you allow, Chairperson of SCOPA, we can invite.
No, that is perfectly fine. The Chairperson can make remarks, not a presentation, just a remarks that we can actually get into the hearing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson of SCOPA, honorable members and Deputy Minister and the department representatives. With me today, I'm with the Chair of Audit and Risk Committee, Ms. Jasmina Patel, the CFO of the SABC and the COO. They are both in attendance. I do want to apologize to the committee for the non-attendance of the Group CEO. He lost his brother and he had to rush home to make funeral arrangements. And that's the only reason why he's not here. And I do want to apologize on his behalf. Thank you for this opportunity. In the main, we, as the SABC, have aligned and agreed with the recommendations made by the Auditor General around the need for us to focus on really dealing with the historical irregular expenditure. That is one of our main focus that we are driving. When it comes to our turnaround strategy, we have implemented quite a lot of the recommendation or what we had set for ourselves as outlined in our turnaround. And as a result of that, we've had 2 quarters where we were profitable as the SABC. So it does give an indication that a lot of progress has been made. Of course, on the area of consequence management, until we are able to conclude with the process of identifying all possible irregular expenditure that happened in the prior years, that will give input into the process of consequence management. So that we are quite aware that there needs to be focus and emphasis in making sure that consequence management is adequately addressed and we focus on it. In the main, we are very grateful for the opportunity to engage with SCOPA, and we are looking forward to a productive engagement. I would like to hand over to the Chair of SCOPA.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Right, Mazamban, please kick us off with the hearing, and we are good to go.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try my camera, but I might have to switch it off. Mr. Chairman, the Deputy Minister is skating on thin ice with his innuendos about my motivations, and I suggest that he stays away from that in future and not play his politics here. I simply don't accept that a cabinet committee meeting must take precedence over a SCOPA meeting, and that's my position. And it's, you know, he's explained his position, and that's my position. So let's go. Mr. Chairman, I'll be dealing with, as you know, with going concern, fruitless and weightless, wasteful expenditure and irregular expenditure. Let me just start with wasteful expenditure. In the update report from SABC that we've received, there's a lot of comments and highlights about fruitless and wasteful expenditure having been written off, approved for write-off, but very little about recoveries. And so what and the chair of the board has just talked about consequence management. So, and stating that that has to wait for all of this to be identified, and quite honestly, it's highly unlikely that even if we wait 10 years, that all irregular and wasteful expenditure will ever be identified. So my question then is, how many people have actually faced the consequences of their malfeasance? And if none, why not?
As a standard, chairs, you know, I won't come in, so you just respond to the questions as they are posed.
Can't hear you.
Good morning, Chairperson of SCOPA. I just want to confirm you can see and hear me well.
Yep, we can.
Thank you very much. So good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable Committee members, DM, my Board Chair, my Audit and Risk Chair, executives of the SABC. I'm Yolanda van Biljon, I'm the Chief Financial Officer. So just to also confirm, I've got the support of a number of the Executive Committee here today. In the room with me is the whole of the SCM management, as well as members of the team that deals with fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I just want to confirm, Chair, so in terms of the proceedings, so we just for now, we're going to have an engagement in the sense a question will be asked and then we will answer. I just want to confirm. So we don't wait for a number of questions and then we go. I just want to ensure that I know how you prefer it to be dealt with.
Yes, one question, one response, one question, one response, so that nothing gets lost, yes.
Thank you very much. So with respect to fruitless and wasteful expenditure, we have inherited a significant balance when the current board and management joined in 2017 and 2018 respectively. The focus in terms of that specific topic has been on the fruitless and wasteful that we inherited at that time, while trying to not only enhance the internal control environment for the year since up to today, but because of the themes that is prevailing from the past, and you clearly have read the submission. It speaks to highlights, lowlights, action plans, and the likes. The focus on the items that's been presented for write-off were the historic items, which in many cases meant that having followed the processes, it was often very difficult to identify a responsible person and then definitely to proceed with recoveries. That's with respect to the historic things. Some of the items that had been condoned, for example, relates to content that weren't broadcasted in between 2009 and 2015. There were sports rights that had similar kind of challenges in that period. One of the other items that were condoned related to the pay-as-you-earn on fringe benefits that weren't calculated properly at the time. Again, we're looking at the period 2014 to 2017. We try to get the information, try to identify responsible people, but for the historic things, it has certainly proven a major challenge. So we also have a number of oversight bodies that participate in the write-off and/or condonation request before it gets to the audit and risk typically, that needs to endorse it before it goes to board. So it takes a lot of time to gather the information and identify the responsible parties. And when the board is satisfied that we have honestly done everything reasonably possible, they will then proceed with the write-off thereof. Now, there are a number of items, particularly in the last 3 years, and as the in-year balances have reduced, and I'll speak to the main themes, but for example, there were S&T, subsistence and travel allowances, at some point, which was identified in the course of a forensics audit. And those, for example, have been recovered. There's travel cancellations that has taken place over the past number of years. Again, those have been recovered. Today, what we have mainly in the register relates to interest on repeat fees, and I'll elaborate a little bit on that in a second. And the other main theme in the year that we are discussing here with you today is with respect to a lease in one of our regions. Now, interest in repeat fees, again, the original matter that finds us with the interest in per se comes actually from 2007. It is an engagement that affects the whole of the creative industry, and a number of stakeholders are affected. We are, as we sit here, busy rolling out a plan with the communication plan with our stakeholders to identify, to change this practice that finds us here. So it's not necessarily that you can identify a responsible person in this specific case. It is a practice that finds us here, and we are in the process of changing that. When you look at the Mbombela lease, in particular, the region, the matter is also the subject of an SIU investigation, and the parties are currently, I think, proceeding to the special tribunal, and as such, we will be proceeding with either identifying a responsible person. Currently, however, just to interrupt myself, we have been informed that there's no criminal activities being identified in the specific case, but there is a discussion to be had and conclusion to be reached on certain recoveries. And in that respect, we are working with the SIU to deal with that, and the recovery will therefore in due course take place depending on the outcome of the tribunal. So if you ask me, as I sit here in Fruitless and Wasteful, how many people have faced consequences, I hope that it gives you a sense that I can't tell you it's 3 or 4 or 5. I can tell you that it's been taking place in the last few years, that we have challenges with the history, and then with the particular themes in the current year, I hope I gave you a sense of the activities that are underway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, CFO. Yeah, so what I think we then have to get from you, if you can't give it to us now, is a list of the people who have faced some sort of disciplinary action and what the consequences have been for that. And so, I mean, it's just an indication of the hopeless situation in the entity that you can't identify people involved in decision-making over a historic period. Because it's one of the issues that I think flows throughout the report from the SABC to us is the lack of any detail in the annual report. So it applies equally to irregular expenditure as well as to wasteful expenditure. We get high level, like you've just done, you've given us a very high level comment about how difficult it is, et cetera, et cetera. You've gone into a little bit more detail about Mbombela, but generally speaking, we're not getting the detail. And therefore it makes it very difficult for us to drill down and establish some sort of oversight role that we should be playing. So the Mbombela one, just to focus on that for a second, you say you're looking for a responsible person there, and the SIU is investigating and so on. Is that the rental agreement with Ryback Prop 001 PDY Limited? Is that the issue? So in your report to Scopa, it's a third Q3 progress report, December 2021. You've identified the person. That person is Ian Blakey. So why are you saying you're still trying to identify the person? Can you explain that, please?
Thank you very much, sir, for the question. Maybe just to indicate, my CEO always refers to the hollowed out institution that we inherited. And it's the fact that we are struggling to identify people with before 2018 is as a result of that. The lack of detail in the annual report, obviously we follow the guidelines prescribed by National Treasury or the accounting standards. but we did endeavor to give you as much as possible information in the pack that we submitted. With respect to Mbombela and the references to our COO, so how the accounting system works is it's related to a function. A function has got an executive ultimately assigned to it. You will see my name and a number of the other executives in that process as well. It is the person who is today overseeing the specific business unit. It does not mean that that's the person that resulted in the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, as the case may be. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, I think that it cannot be that the person ultimately in charge just simply escapes any culpability. So we'll monitor that as the process goes on. And if your name is there for some, then you must accept culpability as well, if there's sufficient evidence there. So the question of irregular and wasteful expenditure is quite a difficult one to deal with if we don't have the details. But let's just look at the one that's sort of been covered to some extent, is that the interest and penalties and fines, etc., is highlighted as the provinces having trouble with local municipalities, telecom, etc., etc. What exactly is the issue there? If I know that my telephone account has to be paid monthly. I know that if I don't pay it, it's going to be cut off. I pay it promptly. What is the real issue for these late payments or non-payments?
Thank you, sir. Historically, definitely there was a lack of discipline. It affects all the regions, and it has been an historic major problem. Of course, things like vacancies and that kind of things didn't help. In the last 3 years, however, what we have done, we have firstly engaged with the municipalities to ensure that there's alignment between their account billing dates and the payment dates and our financial system payment dates. The organization typically pays once a month at the end of a month. That is how we manage payments and our cash flow as well. But in this case, like you rightly say, your account can be due in the middle of a month, for example. So we have made special arrangements in the last 2 years that payment requirement is met on the day that the payment, the invoice demands. Secondly, with Telkom, for example, we have literally tens or if not nearly 100 different accounts with them, depending on the time we find ourselves in, depending on whether there's outside broadcast taking place. And there's the processes that we followed with in that case was not aligned with them as well. And obviously their systems generate interest automatically. So what we have done in the last 6 months is encourage an engagement with them, and it's nearly done, where we are together with them looking at how we consolidate the accounts to be able to ensure that as the finance team in the SABC confirms the accuracy of the billing, that the timing of the payment takes place per their expectations. Of course, there's processes that we need to follow to ensure that we pay what is due, and therefore it takes time as well. The second thing is our Sapc system has been enhanced to assist with this consolidation of the telecom accounts. So that is partly why we find ourselves here today. We have not yet, I think, made a determination how we're going to deal with the consequence management in this specific case. As you saw in the register, it's hundreds of line items, sometimes with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 cents even associated with it. But we do follow the processes per the regulations, etc., to get to that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CFO. Yeah, it leads into the main topic for me for this morning, really. I mean, the irregular and fruitless expenditure, it's just going on and on. It continues as we speak. Your systems still haven't stopped it entirely or reduced it to an acceptable minimum. But yeah, I don't know what else, Mr. Chairman, I can raise on those issues. There might be other members who've got specific issues on the long list that CFO has referred to, and it is a long list. And I've raised two of the primary ones. But then let's just talk about this going concern issue. Right, so the board chair has indicated that there were some profits in 2 quarters, but basically the SABC is continues to run at a loss, and the Auditor General is very concerned about that. And the only reason that you can claim to be a going concern is that you are misappropriating funds meant for other projects, capital projects, I can't remember what the actual word is, and using it for operational costs. There was a bailout of 3 odd billion rand given to the SABC for specific projects or use, and a great deal of that has not been used. About 1.5 billion has not been used for that purpose. It's been used for operating costs. So first of all, how much of the approximately 1.5 billion, and I'll have to find the exact figure just now, remains or has been used for operating costs? How much? Can you give me that figure?
Not 1 rand, sir.
Why is the Auditor General saying differently then?
No, I don't believe the Auditor General is even suggesting that. That money is ring-fenced. We adhere to the appropriations bill that permitted us to get the bailout. It's managed in terms of a very strict SOP. It's been audited. Those funds have never been used for anything other than what it was designed for and for what we received and applied for.
Okay. All right, so we'll have to ask the Auditor General about that. So let's accept what you're saying. So it hasn't been used. So SABC runs year after year at a loss. Where is the SABC getting the cash from to pay its creditors if it's not using any portion of the 3 billion?
Honourable Member, maybe let me first say the strict definition of going concern that the AG judges its auditees against is whether you are able to meet your obligations in the 12 months post the year end. We have...
CFO, sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, I understand how going concern status is determined. My question is, if you're running year after year at a loss, and perhaps 2 quarters at a profit, as per the board chair, how are you funding the liabilities of the SABC?
Yes, thank you, sir. I was about to elaborate further on that. So, as early as 2018, we had developed very strict cash management practices. At the time, we were in austerity measures. However, since the receipt of the bailout, as much as the austerity measures may have been lifted, we continue with the cash management practices. That is anything from a combination of a monthly meeting with the senior representatives throughout business to look at what is expected to be paid by when. If we need to reduce the payments requested to fit within the funds that we have available, there's then a collective decision made around that. Then there's engagements that takes place with those that may or may not be affected. And today, we are able to, in the last, I think, nearly 18 months, we have not had to go into any austerity measures. We are able to meet our obligations when it is due. In other words, our payment days, I think, is less than 40 days at this point in time. And it's a combination of the 30 days from invoice as well as otherwise negotiated, as is permitted by the PFMA. So what also contributes to the available funds, if you will, is that we continue to have delayed or slow spend. So even if the revenue generation has not been what we wanted it in the last 2 years, we then ensure that there are savings. Anything that can be postponed is postponed, so that when we do have available funds, we commit ourselves to that. So that is how we manage to meet our obligations.
Yeah, thank you, CFO, but I'm afraid I'm just not understanding, because like your household budget, if you run at a loss, it means you're spending more money than you're receiving. That's the bottom line. So if you've been running at a loss year on year and you haven't used the bailout to fund those losses, how have you funded them? That's my question. Cutting costs is very important, and thank you for those efforts to ensure that the costs are cut. But if you've been running at a loss and your revenue has been less than your expenditure, how have you been funding that expenditure?
So the bailout funds that we applied for related to content and capital and the trade and other payables as at the 30th of September 2019. So obviously that balance have been settled, I think, as much as 98%, the trade and other payables, that is. Today, as I sit here, you refer to the 1.5 billion that was left at approximately a year ago. We still have about $1 billion left, so another 500 million of that, I'm trying to just illustrate the principle, has then gone to dedicated capital projects and or specific content. So that also helps with the funding requirements. Secondly, in the course of our turnaround plan broadly, some of the initiatives that we implemented also yielded efficiencies. So again, it comes in various forms of savings that we are then able to use for other purposes. Then what is also expected in the next few weeks, or hopefully a month or two, is the proceeds from our sale of our non-core assets. And that also goes towards funding specific capital projects. We've sold Sanlam shares that we had, that, for example, also contributes. So a combination of the cash management practices, the operational cash that we do generate, the sale of the non-core assets, and last but not least is we have managed to re-establish very good relationships with our financial institutions as of about 2 years ago. The support in the form of the bailout gave them a lot of comfort as to how the shareholder views the SABC, its turnaround plan and its future. And as such, our financial institutions have also come to the party to assist with innovative measures to help us manage it. So, for example, we have a receivables funding facility, which has been put in place in the last sort of 18 months. And we were even able to get access to Forex lines, for example, and full maintenance lease mechanisms to help us manage our cash flow. And all of this is supplemented by an SOP. We have what we call a liquidity SOP, which determines how much cash we need to have available and freely accessible at any given point in time. And in the context of all of these factors, we endeavor to meet our obligations. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, CFO. That now I'm starting to get some idea of what the cash flow issues are. So essentially what you're saying is the AG is actually right, that some of the bailout has been used to assist with operational expenses, and it was included in the mandate given on the bailout. So it seems that that some, if I understand you correctly, in programming and so on, expenses that would otherwise have had to come out of revenue have been allowed against the bailout, and that's fine. We can't argue about that if that was the mandate that was given to you. So I'm curious now, because even with that, and let's say we look just at the financial year the last one that we're looking at. The next one is due quite soon, but it's post 2019. You talk about some arrangements with financial institutions. So what kind of loans or overdrafts is the SABC running with the banks or other financial institutions? And what is the extent of the liabilities there?
Sir, let me first just clarify. When we applied for the bailout, there were specific items that formed part of both the content as well as the capital, our long-term infrastructure plan. So the bailout funding remains ring-fenced to only be applied to those items. And if there are variations internally, there's a process that needs to be followed. But we have never used the bailout funding for my definition of operational expenditure. Could be anything from salaries to travel costs to consulting fees, none of that. So maybe my understanding of operational expenditure is just a bit different to yours, and hence my response. The loans and overdrafts, we have not used it, but I think we have about, I think it's 15 million overdraft facility, but we've not used it. I don't know before my time, but certainly not since 2018. We've not used it, and we haven't needed to use it. The things like the debtors funding facility is valued, I think the max is about 280 million that we can access. It's a rolling facility, so you're actually factoring debtors. That's what happens. So you just get the funding in advance, and as the debtors pays, it goes into a ring-fenced bank account, and then the facility tops itself up as well. So I hope that answers your question, sir.
Thanks, CFO. Yeah, no, look, operating cost definition will differ, but I've accepted that. So essentially, part of the losses in terms of programming, I assume, or the issues are large in terms of the mandate on the bailout, have been covered by funding from there. So that still leaves the question of going concern, but let's move on to the factoring of debtors. So your revenue has decreased year on year, and so when you're factoring debtors, you're factoring a apparently decreasing revenue stream. First of all, what is it costing to factor the debtors? Normally, factoring debtors is a hugely expensive route to take, and it's a route in desperation. In my experience of accounting with many firms over many years, debt factoring is something that is avoided until there's just simply either that or bankruptcy. So what are the costs of the debt factoring? And the facility you talk about, I think it was 218 million. Is that being adjusted as the debtors book obviously must be coming down, given that the revenue is coming down?
So maybe just to confirm, sir, around what I understood your comment on losses in the mandate funded potentially by the bailout. We do track the programs that we did that was part of the list, to make sure that if there are losses, it might be mandate related, like, for example, education and religion. You can very seldom and highly unlikely you will ever make profits on that. But for example, soaps and dramas and other entertainment content, another endeavor of the management over the last 3 years have been to ensure that we have break-even but profitable properties. And we've put a host of measures and mechanisms in place to ensure that that's achieved, amongst others, simply sending things back and refusing to approve it if it's not profitable. Coming to reducing revenue and the factoring of data. So as I tried to explain, the mechanism has been made available to us. In the past year, we used it once to test it. So in other words, we haven't needed it. You pay for the having to when you use it. And I think it's a percentage. I mean, 2% comes to mind, but I can't remember exactly. And as you rightly say, having put it in place in the past year, or in that year, and in the past financial year as well, the current one, 22, and not needing it, we have reduced it. We try to be proactive also in in ensuring that we understand what business needs will be. To give you an idea, we do have about our long-term capital plan is 2 billion rand. So you want to be able to have funding mechanisms that can be executed or initiated when you need that. But as business doesn't need it, our management of cash and liquidity also changed. So that facility have been reduced now to, I think it's about 100 million, and it is a backup plan. And with the reduction, also any related costs are currently being renegotiated. We did have our credit review in December with the financial institutions, and we're waiting for the final outcome.
Thanks, CFO. So just let me get the confirmation. So you have no bank overdraft, no bank loans, and your creditors are being paid on a 30-day or negotiated settlement terms. And the year that we're in now, whilst you've made a profit for 2 quarters, is it likely to break even or show a loss or make a profit? Can you just confirm the no bank overdraft, no bank loans, not using the debtors factoring, you're paying all your liabilities on time, and the current year is likely to produce what? A loss, a profit, break even?
There's something happening on this computer. If you lose us in a few moments, please just bear with us. It wants to restart. We don't know why, and we can't fix it now. So if you lose us, then we haven't run our way. We're coming back. We have an overdraft. We have not used it. We have no loans, strictly speaking. I'm excluding finance management leases for fleet vehicles, for example. We do have that. We are this financial year likely to end at around 200 to 300 million rand loss against a budget of about a 600 million rand loss. We are currently, we have just on the 28th finalized our corporate plan for the next 3 years, and we do endeavor to make break even or profits in the next 3 financial years.
Thanks very much. So the year will finish at a loss. That will be an accumulated loss. And it just fascinates me that 200 million loss is not being financed from other sources other than revenue. Obviously, if it's a lost revenue, you can't finance it. Your liabilities are paid on time. You're not using your overdraft facility. You're not factoring your debtors. This is an incredible business. I'm afraid I don't quite understand it, and I know you're trying very hard. I'm not suggesting that you're not trying hard, but I'm afraid I just don't get where the money's coming from to fund the loss. And if you want to have one more attempt to convince me, that's fine. But I don't understand it. Sorry.
So to maybe one final time, because I understand how it doesn't make sense. Just remember, of course, losses. The accounting definition of losses will include things like depreciation and that kind of stuff as well. But our revenue is about, I think, 1.4 billion less than what we budgeted for in this year. But our expenditure is about 1.8 billion less than what we budgeted. So you see there's a gap in the expenditure, and that ideally results in cash that is then available for other purposes. And noting that the part that's ring-fenced from the bailout sits separately, and it is, of course, capital expenditure. So yeah, somehow we are able to do it. We try to cut our cloth to our size. Sometimes business hates me because we simply say no. Content in particular is a theme that's attracting our attention because we haven't been able to spend what we want to do. And then there's the conversation around the fresh and compelling content. But again, we can't spend for the sake of spending. So we are trying to be extremely prudent with how we work with our funds.
Thank you, CFO. I absolutely accept that there are items on the income statement or whatever it's called today, it's got a new name, which are not cash items, but theoretically they cash in the background, because if you're leasing, if you've purchased a vehicle or something and you write off the depreciation, you're also paying for the vehicle. So sometimes it's not direct cash, it's indirect, but I understand that the concept of depreciation and other expenses which are not actually cash expenses. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to seeing the results for the 21-22 year with some interest, and to see whether in fact we shouldn't float the shares on the JSE, because it sounds like this is a business that might be worth investing in. But yeah, I'm being facetious, and forgive me, Madam CFO. I'm not getting at you about it. It is though of concern that you guys are going to come back for further bailouts, and we're going to have to consider very carefully all the good work that you seem to be doing in terms of cost reduction. But, Mr. Chairman, cost reduction is important, but far more important is pushing revenue. Far more important. And this is a very competitive market. And we've been told that advertising is decreasing. And to push revenue, you've got to produce a product which your clients and customers want. And I accept that there's a mandate, and you mentioned religion and education. And you know, there's a discussion that could take place about if you give a mandate like that, which is highly unlikely to be profitable, whether there's a need to fund that separately, but that's another discussion. But the SABC, to be quite honest, doesn't grip me as a viewer. I do pay my license fee religiously. I pay 2 licenses, one here in Cape Town and one back home in Ladysmith. But to be honest with you, I don't remember once watching SABC in the last 12 months. And it's because your program content doesn't grip my attention. Now, I might be very much the minority. The majority of South Africans might think it's wonderful, but then we should be seeing revenue growing, not decreasing. Advertisers would be clamoring to advertise if indeed the viewership were so good, and we can get viewership numbers, I'm sure. So, Mr. Chairman, the concern of the Auditor General about the going concern, I think, is a valid concern and remains one, and one which we're going to have to monitor. I do understand how the status of going concern is determined, but I don't think that determination, if it is based on bailouts, should in fact be. So now I'm still on, Mr. Chairman. My screen's gone blank. Oh, there you are. You're back. Sorry, our connection here is not good, and I'm still on. I'm still on the hotspot. So, Mr. Chairman, let me leave it at that, and a big thank you to CFO for not responding to me in a way that shows irritation, given my sometimes annoying questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, if he's not there, let me get in with my own questions.
We're losing. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, colleague. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, let's do this then. Can I take Ubabu some your colleagues, because the issues largely overlap, and then we will do follow-ups after Ubabu Somyo, so that nothing is lost. So, Ubabu Somyo, can I hand over to you?
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Can I first get into the amplification of what Honorable Lisa has got into in as far as the SABC's standing in terms of its own finances as a going concern, in recognition of the fact that this is their first full year for them to apply fully their turnaround strategy, which has got signals of a positive benefit, which we could somewhat recognize that fact. And secondly, the fact that they have received the 3.2 billion rand from National Treasury to be utilized mainly for capitalization of SAPC, which has earned them some form of applying brakes on their negativity in as far as their finances are concerned. The third point is on the though that there's been that kind of a benefit, there's been a decrease in their revenue, which has been recognized, falling at 12.4% in total, which maybe gets on to the point which Honorable Liz was adamant that to make sense, when you have met such losses, how then have you sustained yourself, and how can you probably prove that your going concern status is somewhat sustained? And looking into your advertising, sponsorships, TV license fees, and the decrease, which is so significant around those areas which would have been a benefit in terms of your revenue going forward. The fourth point is on the expenditure decrease, something which you have alluded to, that while you had decrease in terms of revenue, we have as well realized some form of a decrease in terms of expenditure, which is less than your decrease in revenue. Decrease in revenue, 12.4%, decrease in expenditure, 10.2%, which does not create a balance somewhat to clearly deal with the factor which you want to emphasize on. The loss for the year increased by 3.7% from 511.3 million rand in 2020 to 530 million rand in 2021. You see, so the current status begins to show a sense of concern where there is a somewhat a lack of balance on your, whether the depreciation in terms of the revenue and depreciation in terms of your expenditure, and there's something which you must do differently on the areas which would sustain your revenue, you see, in the coming years. So that amplification begins to say the committee, our concern, as indicated by the Auditor General, is a bit valid per se, and therefore we plead for SAPC to do more to ensure that you sustain the costs to reach a level where we would say we are comfortable with your going concern status. Any comment there?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I just first want to make a statement or respond to one of the final comments of Honourable Liz, which then leads into your questions as well. And I will also invite my COO sitting next to me to speak to revenue generation. But we do have no intention to firstly come back for a bailout. This business is run by a group of people and a board that believes it's got all the building blocks in place to return to financial sustainability. Our corporate plan that you will probably see in coming months firstly reflects that. The single biggest outstanding item is to ensure the regulatory environment creates a platform for permanent sustainability. We are still confronted with the must carry regulations, port regulations, etc. So if you then go into a little bit more specifics, Of course, the year under review, I mean, we're talking about it 10, 11 months after that year, and it feels like the last 2 years have been lost years. But that particular year, of course, had the full brunt of the COVID impact, and everybody trying to grapple with it. So in the revenue space, you then saw that in the quarters 1 and 2, we had significant losses. It's also the time when new GEs joined in our sales division. He joined, in fact, in April. So did the GE in the video entertainment business, joined in April 2020. So in the second part of that year, quarter 3 and 4, the revenue did already start to show marginal improvement. So much so that we nearly, the 741 million rand loss on advertising revenue was ultimately only 700 million for the full year because of the ability to recover in quarters 3 and 4. If you, and yes, things like a theme like sponsorship revenue, for example, became very attractive. It's very attractive today still because the advertisers, I call it a pay-as-you-go kind of system. They don't need to commit for a year or 2 at this point in time in terms of some of the mechanisms we have because the uncertainty remains. So that's why sponsorships have shown good progress. If you then look at, and TV licenses, maybe just a short comment, as much as I'm sure you're aware of it or can understand it, is the fact that the economic impact is exactly directly expressed in our ability to collect TV licenses. Because as people struggle to make ends meet and put bread on the table, the last thing they are going to do is buy a new television or potentially consider renewing their TV licenses. Which means the theme of attractive and compelling content, speaking to Honorable Lisa's comments, I understand where you're coming from, sir. My GE video entertainment is chomping at the bit to bring that content to the organization. We have already, I think, is it nearly 111 new productions in some shape or form that's come on stream in the last 18 months. But the requirement is that unless it's something like religion or education that's directly mandate related, that it must be profitable. So all of these things should come together where people like Honorable Lise, who doesn't watch SABC, will be attracted back and will then also be keen to pay his TV license ideally. Just another note, and another important investment the organization is in this coming financial year intending to make for the first time, certainly since the management joined, is the investment in marketing. In other words, to take the messages of our compelling content, the organization that is supposed to be stable, that's under solid management, etc., to new eyes and ears, and tell them, come watch, come see what there is. But you will notice the significant deviation in marketing for example, as well. I think we spent about 4 million or something like that in this year, but we are spending nearly 4% of revenue in the next financial year on it to take the message to the masses and attract them back. If you look at the losses, strictly speaking, you are of course 100% correct. A loss of 511 million in 2020 became 530 million in 2021. The but is the once-off items. Once-off items, it happens literally like that just once. And I think in one of the slides you might have the detail thereof. And the accountants extract those to be able to look at operational performance of an organization and focus the attention where it should be. So a very big once-off item in that 2021 financial year was the settlements we paid as part of our Section 189 to return our employee cost to reasonable and market-related percentages and ensure that we have a target operating model that speaks to the business of the future. So if you were to just for a moment consider the 177 million rand that was spent on that Section 189 process, and you were to reduce it from the loss of 530 million, you get a better sense of what is true operational performance, noting that it was under extremely difficult circumstances like every other organization in this country. I hope I made some remarks that resonate with you, sir.
Thank you very much, CFO. In terms of the accounting standards, when you table financials, there's an expectation from the Auditor General. As you would know, that is informed by both PFMA and the Companies Act. Your own statements had to undergo major corrections. Is that the case?
If you speak about major corrections, a normal theme of audits, sir, is that there will be unadjusted and adjusted entries that are being made. So those are part of every audit, and they did happen in our case as well. They did not concern the AG sufficient to determine that the financial statement is not a fair representation of the performance of the organization.
But the Auditor General insists that those misstatements have given rise into an audit, which is somewhat a qualified audit in a sense, and the qualifications rest hardly on that as well.
So what they are referring to is the completeness of our irregular expenditure register, a big project that's been ongoing in the organization since about 2018. And that's also partly why, other than going concern, we had even a disclaimer opinion about 3 or 4 years ago as a result of processes and procedures we didn't have in place to give them sufficient comfort that that register includes every last irregular expenditure item that we incurred. In the year under review year today, the 2021 year, the AG was satisfied with our measures put in place to ensure that that register is complete. And there's information being supplied in the pack to yourself that I hope supports that. Their concern is the opening balance on the 1st of April 2020. That balance, obviously, it's about 2 billion or so approximately, comes literally from 2011, more or less. And that balance, because of very similar circumstances to the fruitless and wasteful that I alluded to earlier, has not allowed us yet to conclude the completeness activities on that. The management have opted to focus on all our transactions from 1 April 2018, and we are in December, we were about 69% concluded on reviewing every single transaction in this organization since that date. And you're looking at about 11 billion rand spent on goods and services in that period, and that, for example, excludes content. So we have a extensive progress project with a team of people, small team, but a team nonetheless, that's been working their way back to conclude that we are able to say that balance on 1 April 2020 is complete as well. The team is currently more or less in 2019, 2018, if I'm not mistaken, and we are working full steam to have the activity concluded by the time the year-end audit starts. The one activity that will then remain is subject to us confirming that we have put proper measures and procedures in place to ensure the completeness, the prevention, detection, monitoring, and consequence management remedial action is to engage with National Treasury on the balance as at 1 April 2018. To state that because of themes like lack of access to information and responsible people that have either left or you can't identify anymore, that we wish to have a conversation to ring fence that balance. But we will have that hopefully sometime in the next 6 months when we are able to say emphatically, and we pass the audit assurance that the balance as of 1 April 2018 is complete and accurate.
One is happy that something is being done towards that direction. I hope that you would meet your target. But one thing as well, CFO, when we had a meeting with yourselves, the very last meeting, there was a commitment from the side of SABC that they have a small committee, which was termed a loss control committee, which was established in August 2020, with the core responsibility to address consequence management. How many cases have gone through that committee, and what is the success level of the committee to realize its own main objective?
Thank you for the question, sir. So the committee is indeed up and running again in the last year. It was severely affected in the course of the restructuring of the organization and target operating model, and it lost some members. And we had to reconstitute it, but they are, I think, as of about 6 or 8 months ago now, running very well. It's a cross-functional team, legal, HR, and finance people. They have so far, I think the exact number we will my team must be able to help me. I'm going to speak in terms of principles, then they can give you an exact number. And of course, we did try to share with you the status of consequence management in general in the organization. But what has been happening so far is a particular focus on the Auditor General's irregular expenditure identified, as well as that of our internal audit department. Therefore, you will see in the document that we submitted to you, I think in terms of, let me just get there, give you specifics, and then I'll wrap up and get back to the Loss Control Committee. We currently have in total from that 1 April 2018 date that I mentioned, 379 cases of consequence management that needs to be concluded. Of that, we have so far concluded 36, which is related to the auditor findings mainly, and then the number that has passed through the Loss Control Committee. Now, of course, there's the process, there's an investigation that needs to be concluded. Then we need to take our submissions to Treasury. Then it needs to come back before the board concludes on it, if they are required to do so. You can also see in that document, we listed a number of initiatives that are currently either on their way to Loss Control Committee or National Treasury. It would have gone past loss control already, and that will see this value also significantly improve in the next 3 or 4 months. So I don't know if my team has the exact number for that has, so my team indicates that there's 4 explicit cases valued at. They'll give me the value in a second. That's gone via Loss Control Committee. That's, of course, over and above the tax clearance one of about 2.5 billion that has also been presided over by Loss Control. And that was also then ultimately successfully accepted by the AG. So the cases that are currently proceeding is, sorry, we're just adding it up.
This is approximately 80, about 19.
It's about 90 million that has passed through the Loss Control Committee in the last 8 months or so.
Okay, the last question from me, recognizing the fact that you are doing this kind of work, and if you look at the category of cases that you are handling, there are ones which relate to companies who have failed to produce credible tax certificates. Are you still doing business with such companies?
So firstly, sir, today we have measures in place that should ensure that something like that doesn't take place at all, and we're very explicit about monitoring it. A tax clearance certificate, well, and maybe I must say that because it's not supposed to happen anymore today, we don't do business with somebody who doesn't have a tax clearance, and the process is therefore well established and matured. But typically, I think by law, you're not permitted to not pay if a tax clearance is in place, but we don't even enter into a relationship today of any kind for goods, services, or content unless the tax clearance is not present and clear. We also monitor if it's a contract, then we monitor on a regular basis. to ensure that these items remain in compliance, or these entities remain compliant.
Are there any companies that you continue to do business with who are in the firing line on failure to observe some form of sort of a prescript as part of your procurement processes?
As I sit here, Chair, trying to understand your question because it's quite broad, not adhering to SCM prescripts. We monitor BBBEE, for example. We monitor the tax compliance on an ongoing basis. We check blacklisting on the National Treasury website. We check for conflicts of interest. So those would be some of the broad themes that I hope give you a sense. And of course, if one of those four are a no, then we don't proceed until it is sorted out. BEE is a bit of an ongoing conversation, but that's also tracked on an ongoing basis. A team of people look after
it. From my side, Chair, those are the areas which I had a major concern with. My closing on the matters I raised, I've in the first instance made a point that this is the first full year where you have applied your turnaround strategy, and we still stand to see in the continuation of such what are other areas of benefit which would wish you to succeed on, mainly on matters of revenue as a point of emphasis, which would allow our guaranteed support for you pulling through of those areas which seek your own operational ability, so that you don't fall within the other call from Treasury to ask for assistance. We appreciate the fact that you have not utilized in full the 3.4 billion that you have received, which is an indication of financial prudent running of your own books, and something which we think that you need to be encouraged on going forward, so that in the operational mandate that you have, you don't get yourselves and dig more into the grave your own competency in as far as the existence of the public broadcaster is concerned. Those are the areas which I would have wanted to emphasize, Honorable Chair. Our Chair. Our Chair is a bit lost. Sorry, Chair. He has connectivity problems.
Thank you very much, Babsona.
Okay, well. Ngiyakuzwela, Chairman. Ngiyakuzwela, Chairman. Your line is not good at all. Can I assist just to check whether from the members, is there anyone who would want to ask a question or comment while the chair is improving his connectivity? Yo. kunzima.
Hayi kunzima, we are not winning.
Yeah. Sorry, my chair, but can members who want to speak indicate by show of hands, and if not, try to assist the chair to reconnect properly. But it should help.
Am I audible now?
Little bit.
Right. No, I was just asking for colleagues to now make comments and input and to pose their questions.
It looks like Sibadlela chair, there's no hand. I see no hand.
All right.
We've done our level best with honorable leaders to take them on our shoulders.
Okay. No, thank you very much. I just have a few questions myself, and I think it goes specifically to the DM as the political leadership, and then of course to the chair, to first ascertain whether are they confident that the interventions put in place, the SAPC, because most often than not, we are having repeat findings, and there's seemingly no end in sight. Of course, there was improvement in the radio numbers as well, SAFM, for example. So there are indications of that, but generally, in terms of the financial health of the SAPC, there's reason to be concerned. And so I think what we definitely need now is a firm commitment, a definite commitment that there are interventions in place, and whether the things that they are doing, they are confident are the right ones to have the SAPC turn the corner, so that we can be able to have a yardstick measure to hold them accountable, but also a yardstick measure to check on the progress of the turnaround of the SAPC. I note the very emphatic no of the CFO that they will be not making a request for a bailout. So that has to be anchored in something, and it's good and well that there's men and women, as she cites, who are committed to the cause. But that commitment is one aspect. The other aspect is the implementation of the right interventions, and I think we need to have that discussion about the SABC. So I'll ask that first question and then take it from there.
Chair, is it meant for us?
Yes, the ministry and the board.
Okay, Chair, from our side in the ministry, we are satisfied with the implementation of the turnaround, as I've said in the beginning, that the SABC has been able to attain most of the targets that are there on the turnaround plan. This is the second year, as I've said, it's left with 1 year. And so we're confident in as far as that is concerned, because I'm sure all of us, we can observe that there is a relative stability at the SABC, unlike in the past. And this is owing to the board's implementation of the turnaround strategy together with management. So in as far as that is concerned, we are happy, Chair. However, there is still some concerns, as I've said, and the management has assured us that it is working around the clock to deal with that. And that is the decline in revenue that we're experiencing. And if it is not attended to, it might pose a significant threat for the SABC going forward. Management is insisting that there will be no need for a further bailout. But from our side, I think it does remain a concern. And we've encouraged both the board and the management to work towards making sure that this issue is attended to. If you look at the revenue from advertising and other sources, it is declining, and it is a cause for concern for us. But in as far as attending to the issues raised by the Auditor General, I think we generally are satisfied that the management is attending to the issues assisted by the board. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Tim. I'll come back to that. Let's hear from the chairperson of the board.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, for the opportunity, and appreciate the question and input by honorable members. I do want to reassure the committee that we're doing everything possible to make sure that SABC gets to a state of financial viability. I do also want to touch on what the Honorable Chair of SCOPA indicated, what other interventions are necessary for us to achieve that level of profitability. There's about 4 main things. The first one talks to the replacement of the current television license regime with what we call a public media levy, which also has a component where the subscription major players can also assist with the collection of that public media levy. That's very important because it is still one of our major streams of revenue as the SABC. The first one being, of course, commercial activities, which is sponsorship, advertising, and then immediately after that is then the TV license, which we want to change to be a public media levy. The second important thing that needs to happen for the SABC to really get to profitability levels is the regulatory reforms. And this talks to regulations like your mass carry, which does not allow the SABC to have commercial engagements with subscription players. And we made submission to get those kind of regulations changed to be able to get SABC to benefit from its content fully. That's the second one. The third one talks to, in my view, because of our unique, I'll say, role and very high cost structure, signal distribution cost is still one of the major costs faced by the SABC. And we are currently in talks with Sapc through the involvement of the Competition Commission to have the tariffs that Sapc charges us reviewed. And that will give us a saving in the last count of over 250 million rands. And that will significantly improve the SABC profitability and really get the organization to be profitable. The third and the last one, which is the fourth one, talks to the public interest programming. Our mandate as the SABC, as it talks to arts, culture, education, health, there's a number of things we as the SABC that we need to do that will never be profitable. So there needs to be a way for the respective departments to fund those specific programs, of course, without interfering with the editorial independence of the SABC. But if we have to carry a mandate that talks to education, the Department of Basic Education needs to make a contribution in that particular aspect. So in the main, honorable members, those are the 4 things that we believe if there can be regulatory reforms, there can be the replacement of the current TV license regime. There can be clear public funding, rather, of the public mandate as it talks to the things that I've mentioned. And of course, to do away with the mass scale regulation, SABC will be profitable. And you will all be proud of the contribution you've made and the support you've given us over the years.
All right, thank you, Chair. Right. So, but the risk of revenue now remains. And that is why in the question I made reference to what the CFO is saying, that there is no outlook towards the bailout. But can we confidently say here that we are ruling a bailout out 100%? And why I say this and ask this is that it is important to manage expectations, and it is important to be realistic, because the risk of revenue decline it triggers other outlooks in terms of what intervention is there. So I really want the SABC to be very frank with us, so that we can be in a position to set our own oversight in managing the expectations that are there. So can the SABC confidently, seated here and now, rule out the possibilities of a bailout? Because that will be the yardstick measure of how much work you have to do if you are to avoid it.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I can confirm that there is no possibility of the SABC coming back for a bailout. If we look at what we've been able to achieve and the 4 areas that I've highlighted, and we are getting very, very good support from the shareholder representative in getting some of these regulatory changes effected. And I can assure you that there will be no need for another bailout for the SABC.
So what are the risks at play then which arise out of the revenue reduction which is currently at? Chair, I'm saying, right, having said that, what impact then does the decline in revenue have for the SABC? What risk side play arising out of that? And then, of course, the question becomes, having noted those risks, what contingency plans are in place or interventions are in place to push back on that risk?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I will comment and then request the CFO to provide some specifics in it. There's still a lot that can be done in our cost line. The signal distribution cost is a major cost, and I'm confident that we'll be able to realize some savings, which runs into hundreds of millions just on the signal distribution cost. And of course, there is a number of things that we are doing from a revenue point of view, because you don't only manage costs, but you need to be improving revenue. And I'll humbly request the CFO to just give specifics and the COO on what are we doing to address the issue of revenue. CFO, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay. So the revenue decline to one of the themes that drives it is the migration from linear to digital platforms. And as such, in our new financial year, our focus also shifts to putting measures in place to ensure we generate revenue from the digital platforms. That would be one of the things. There's, of course, our partnerships with Telkom, eMedia and the likes that also provides us access to their platforms. That is additional platforms that we are able to generate revenue from. And I think at this point, I might just hand over to my COO to add a few things. I think the bottom line is, Chair of the committee, We do anticipate our revenue to increase in the coming financial year. The major drivers are certainly how we approach the balance between sponsorship and classic advertising, and the measures the team has in place to do that and to maximize our access to market there, but also then from things like the OTT platforms and our deals with some of our trading partners. But I'll hand over to the COO to comment as well.
Thanks, Chair. Ian Plank is here. So the decline in audience obviously has a direct impact on our decline in revenue, advertising revenue. The decline in audience is multi-causational. The global trend that there is, not much we can do about that. There is an impact on the analog switch off, but we are managing that with the department and we're working together with them. And then there's, I think the big one for us is not so much an audience loss, but an audience migration to digital. And right now we do not have our own digital platform. We have gone to market. We're in the final stages of assessing the responses of that. And we will have our own OTT platform in the market by the third quarter of the next current financial year. So we're very upbeat about that. So what that means is we're going to be launching additional channels within the new financial year, but we are also changing the process of acquiring content for our channels. We are optimizing that. It's a big game changer, and you will see a lot more compelling content coming through on our existing platforms, but also the new channels that we are going to be launching that will also be available on our OTT platform. So we will be aggressively playing in the digital space. I can also just give you this level of comfort. We started testing yesterday the software that will enable us to actually commercialize the OTT platforms, not just our own, but third-party platforms as well that we are using. That has started yesterday. We're using it as a pilot phase for this month, and we will go live from next month. So for the first time, we'll start off a financial year where we have the ability to monetize our digital platforms as well, own and third party. Thanks, Chair.
And maybe just also to add before I hand back to you, Chair, we have been speaking mainly about the television channels or video entertainment, but we're well aware of the gold that is in our radio stations. And we are trying to put mechanisms in place that ensures that our command of that audience is reflected in our revenue as well. And similarly, some of the big events that used to be very successful in the past, like the Metro Music Awards, those kind of big events, is hopefully going to come back on stream. And all of that helps to attract people to the organization, generate revenue ultimately, because our advertisers can see the access to market that they have. Thank you, Chair.
All right. So on the basis of your own commitment, we certainly are not expecting the SAPC to be coming back or seeking a bailout. And I wanted that firmly on the record so that in the event that you do, the first question should be, how do we hold you accountable for having not been able to steer the ship in a direction which moves away from a bailout? Because the fiscus is already stretched, and so there has to be a consequence management which prevails, because these bailouts are not a default position, which say if all else fails, there's no problem, we will get a bailout. So I think that very emphatic commitment is something that we will keep on our radar, and give space and time now to the turnaround strategy to run its course. And for, of course, other areas of consequence management, which Honorable Lee spoke about, we would like that in writing by next week, so that we can have it on record, and then we will see where we go from that. I think, colleagues, that is That is really all that one would want to say at this point. We are going to await the completion of the audit and the annual report, of course, later on in the year, to make which will probably clear more things up insofar as the SABC is concerned, and we note that you are a work in progress. So we will await that and note the progress that has been made so far, and leave it at that. Right, colleagues, are there any other issues on your end that you would like to raise?
Aiko.
Right, DM, you've got 5 minutes. If there's any concluding remarks you'd like to make on your side, and the chair, and then we will be good to go.
No, thank you, Chair. Not much. I think most of the issues we have been able to ventilate with the SABC. As you know, that there is a board there, which is an accounting authority, which handle most of the issues in the SABC. Ours is just to do oversight, to monitor whether they are doing what they said they were going to do. But as I said, up to so far, we are satisfied with some of the progress there. There's still areas of improvements in the SABC, which we have spoken to, which management is aware that they have to attend together with the board, all of those issues. We share your concern, Chair, about the sustainability financially of the SABC in line of the decline in revenues. But as we have heard today, there's been some commitment from the SABC that they will attend to that. We're giving them space to do that. Obviously, there are ways in which we can help them, particularly on this on the license issue, the license fees. It's something that this regime needs to change completely. Because we are not getting the revenue that we're supposed to be getting from that side. But otherwise, Chair, just to inform you that we are busy switching off the analog transmission. We have switched off about 5 provinces. There is about 4 that is outstanding, in line with the commitment of the President that the country would have migrated from analog distribution to digital. We are pursuing that goal of the 31st of March. And the SABC has been a very dependable partner in doing that, because most of the analog transmission that we're switching off belongs to the SABC. But otherwise, Chair, thank you very much. And I think in future we will arrange properly. Unfortunately, we were caught up in between all of these meetings. But as you know, we are always available to come and engage with yourself anytime that you want us to come. Otherwise, thank you very much, Chairperson.
No, thank you very much, Tim. And I think we can release you now to go and join the Cabinet Committee. And we will be in constant communication. And next week, we'll be finalizing on that South African Post Office report, which is overdue and you are anticipating. So the committee will be deliberating on that. To you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. May I humbly request that we allow the Chair of Audit and Risk Committee to make the final comments from the SABC side, Ms. Jasmina Patel.
Yeah, maybe before she does, yeah, that's fine. I think it would be a dereliction of duty, though, if I don't make this comment without venturing into its merits and demerits, because it is common cause that there is an issue currently at play at the SABC insofar as the GE of News is concerned, and a legal battle at play. We can only hope that due process has been followed, to the extent to which the SABC does not find itself at the end of the day with a financial burden which could have been avoided, because consequence management in itself, we have found across the spectrum, if not handled correctly, incurs unnecessary costs for the state. And so we will not be drawn into the merits and demerits of it. It's not our purview. Our only purview is that it must not lead to any financial obligations and burdens for the SABC, because it may set into motion precedents which are undesirable for all of us. And so we really hope that due process has been adhered to, and that this will not further complicate the financial situation of the SABC, because poor consequence management is in itself a risk. And that's why I'm saying we probably best I raise it as you bring in the Chair of Audit and Risk. It's just triggered by that at all material times we must handle matters correctly, and say that it's not our matter. Suffice to say that we expect it not to be of detriment to the financial position of the SABC. Right, Chair of Audit and Risk.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Honourable Chair of SCOPA, members of SCOPA, Deputy Minister, representatives of DCDT, Chairperson of SABC, fellow board members and execs. We do take note of what the Chair has raised regarding the matter that we just spoke about, and we'd like to assure you that we are addressing it. As the primary committee responsible for overseeing risk and controls, ARC paid attention to attention on the repeat audit qualification. One of the concerns raised by the AG was that there was lack of leadership when it came to consequence management. So ARC specifically is focusing on that. And we noted that the effectiveness of consequence management as it pertains to prior years is less than ideal, and that there is a need for stronger, sufficient consequence management for wasting public funds. Consequence management includes consideration and implementation of control environment enhancements. It includes instituting disciplinary hearings and reporting to law enforcement. And I would like to assure everyone present is that ARC is emphasizing strengthening of procurement-related controls, and has also insisted that all irregularities exceeding 100,000 is reported to Sapc as required by PRICA, and that there should be consequence management in the form of disciplinaries for those that abuse the system. And to address this, a consequence management register has been introduced, and the guideline for consequence management of financial misconduct has been finalized and approved. So that is what we're doing from our side to ensure that there is improvement in leading on consequence management. I would also like to thank SCOPA and the DM for your continuous support, and also the AGSA, the SIU, and especially the SABC executives and the department. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much on that. Colleagues, let us therefore bring this meeting to an end, and please, colleagues, check your emails. There's correspondence which Sistombi sent yesterday, which is for your consideration and input and guidance. Can I therefore, colleagues, thank you very much for your attendance and participation this morning to this meeting, and thank the DM and the chair of the board and the executives of the SABC for being here. AG, National Treasury and SIU, as always, thank you very much. On that note, the meeting stands adjourned, and there is a house sitting this afternoon, which is a question session. So colleagues, please don't forget about that. The meeting stands adjourned. Happy Wednesday.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.